Hello and welcome. I'm Kenzie.
And I'm Carli, and this is Ask a Therapist.
Each week, we explore life's most relatable questions, from relationships and boundaries to burnout and self-worth, all through a therapist's lens.
We're licensed therapists, but this isn't therapy. It's a place for insight, reflection, and a little humor along the way.
Your questions,
our insights.
Ask a Therapist. This podcast is intended for entertainment and educational purposes only. The content shared should not be considered a substitute for professional mental health care, diagnosis, or treatment. We strongly encourage listeners to seek help from a licensed mental health professional for any personal or psychological concerns.
Any advice or commentary offered is based solely on the information provided. As such, we cannot guarantee any specific outcomes, and the feedback given should not be interpreted as professional mental health advice. If you are experiencing a mental health crisis, please call 911, 988, or 211.
All right, welcome back. It's great to have everyone back this week. We've got a great topic and a little holiday theme for us, but we are going to kick off with an icebreaker question. Kenzie, as we prepare for the Thanksgiving holiday, I would like to know, what is your favorite Thanksgiving dish? And this can be to eat or prepare or both.
Well, first, I'm just going to say that I love Thanksgiving. I love the holiday. I love the food. So it's hard to pick, but it used to be mashed potatoes. Recently has changed to stuffing. I just love it. My mom makes the best stuffing ever. It's just so nostalgic. It's like I prefer hers over anybody's really. So I look forward to that every year. But I do like making mashed potatoes. I'll say if I'm gonna like prepare something, Gordon Ramsay's herbed mashed potatoes are so good. So that's my kind of go-to to make.
Okay.
What about you?
Okay, yeah, fair enough. So I have done like where I only prepare one dish. I've done the whole Thanksgiving before.
Wow.
And my favorite dish, I almost want to say both to prepare and to eat is definitely stuffing. That is my fave. And I will say I like my own stuffing, but I'm going to give my cousin credit, my cousin Tova, because she's the one who gave me my stuffing recipe. But I think that I have perfected it and it is pretty good. And it's the only time that I really have stuffing. Like the other sides I probably eat throughout the year, but Thanksgiving is like, for stuffing. But yeah, maybe a little bit of a cultural difference there because we do sweet potatoes on Thanksgiving as opposed to mashed potatoes. I mean, sometimes if it's a big spread with a lot of people, then there will be more than one type of potato. But if there's only one, we're definitely doing sweet potatoes over here. So, yep.
Is it a sweet potato casserole, like with the marshmallows on top?
No, Kenzie, just sweet potatoes. We don't do casserole. No, I'm not going to speak for all Black people, but I'm just going to say typically in our household, we're just doing like some good old fashioned, sweet potatoes, brown sugar, cinnamon, nutmeg, like along those lines. No like stuff on top. Some people do like marshmallows on top or something, or like pecans. All that's too much for me. Just give me a good old fashioned sweet potato. But my mom always made white sweet potatoes, and they are delicious. So those are actually my preference over regular sweet potatoes. So you gotta try them one time.
Okay, all right, good to know. Well, it sounds delicious. It sounds great.
Fair enough. Should we jump into our question today?
Yes. So speaking of the holidays, this is the week of Thanksgiving. So people are probably gearing up for however you celebrate, if it's with family, with friends. But this question today we felt was relevant. There's obviously kind of a little bit of a joke, but I think there's some seriousness to it too around having conversations about politics around the holidays. And so we thought that this could be a little bit of like a holiday special episode because this question touches on that. So it comes from a 38-year-old male, and he says, how do you deal with close friends and family members who have opposing political views in the current climate in the United States?
Very good question. Always touchy when you get into topics like politics and religion and, things that people feel very passionately about. And I know for a lot of people, I've had these conversations, with clients and with friends and family. A lot of people have a lot of anxiety around what it's going to be like having to, sit around the table and potentially have things brought up that are a little bit sensitive and what to do in those situations. So I'm really grateful for this question. I hope that we can offer a little bit of feedback here. When I first heard this question, one of my initial thoughts was pick your battles. And in that meaning, you don't have to engage in every discussion that is posed to you. I get that sometimes people feel inclined to give a response, especially if you feel like something that's being said is invalidating of your perspective, or in some cases, maybe even invalidating of your identity in some way. But just knowing that you have the choice in what you choose to engage on versus when you're like, I don't think this is a conversation that I'm going to have right now. Just reminding people that you do have a choice and, showing up. I get that. Now, everybody's family is different. And so, your family may try to draw you in, or certain people may have expectations as to how the conversation is going to go. But just reminding people that, you have choice. Just because someone else asks a question or poses a particular viewpoint doesn't necessarily mean that you always have to take the bait. I don't know what you think about that, Kenzie. Is that an option in your mind?
Yeah, I think absolutely. I think what some people might respond to, or where they get conflicted with that, is if I don't say something, does that mean that I'm complicit? The idea of politics, why is politics such a hot, emotionally charged subject? And I think ultimately because politics does touch on your values, your identity, your belonging, your security. And so when someone that you love has opposing views on those values, it can feel like a direct attack. It can feel personal. And so I think that sometimes it can be difficult for people to choose their battles when it feels personal, or even when it feels like if I don't say something, does that just mean that I'm okay with what the other person is saying? It can kind of feel like, do I need to be standing up for what I think is right here? What would you say to that?
100%. And I can definitely understand that. And the political climate has changed over the years. I do actually remember a time where people talked about politics and having different views, and it didn't necessarily blow up into, full-fledged arguments and in some cases fights and things of that nature. But it is very hard to talk about these things because there are plenty of people, the minute that you express any sort of opposing view, you get cut off. And in some instances, I kind of understand that. I have heard people share perspectives where I'm like, I don't know that I need to hear any more of what you think because you've made it very clear that, you don't care about the things that are important to me, or you don't see me as human, or and so I understand why people draw those hard lines, and why it can be difficult to, in some cases, just walk away when it feels like, no, actually, I'm in this room and I am going to speak up and say something, on my own behalf or on behalf of people that I care about. And so, but that's why I say choose your battles, right? It's more so just in the choice, actually recognizing that it is a choice. And I think this relates a little bit to something we were saying about boundaries, about it being the distance at which I can love you and love myself. I think it's kind of similar here. You've got to kind of know your boundaries. How can I stay connected? Because I'm assuming this is people that you love and care about. They said close family and friends. So the goal is to stay connected while still being true to yourself and not feeling like you're betraying yourself. And that can be a hard line to walk.
Absolutely. This does really remind me of our past episode that we did on friendships, and just thinking about the similarities of kind of assessing your relationship to that person, what is important for you about that relationship, and where you draw those lines or those boundaries. Some tools that I was kind of thinking of along those lines to give this listener, I have a couple. I'll start with maybe just the first two that touches on that. But first I would say assess what you want from the relationship. Like, do you want to change that person's mind, or do you want to preserve the relationship? And so that might look different for different people in your life. If you are having difficult conversations around politics with maybe a friend that you feel like, you know what, they're not really valuing me as a person or what I believe in, or some of these just kind of like basic rights that I feel like are important. And that's enough for me to say, I don't really know that this is a person that I want to keep in my life. The boundaries that you set there, or assessing what you want from that relationship might look different if it's like a grandparent or an aunt or uncle that you really care about and you love, and you don't want to cut that relationship off, but you know that historically conversing around politics has not necessarily gone well.
Yeah, I like that, and it kind of reminds me a little bit of, not that I'm a huge Dr. Phil fan, but it reminds me a little bit of the, like, do you want to be right or do you want to be happy? Like, you know,
Sure.
There may be some relationships where you do feel like preserving the relationship is prioritized over making your point, or in some instances, maybe even adhering to your value on that particular thing. And I like the idea of thinking about what you want to get out of it, because I think sometimes the frustrating part is that we're not totally clear on what we're looking for, so we just keep going back and forth, right? Are we trying to like change that person's mind, or are we just wanting to be heard and respected? Because, you know, maybe it's just a matter of laying it out there and we can agree to disagree. So being clear on what you're hoping to accomplish, I think, is pretty important. And, you know, your comment about like family members, you know, for some people, I understand not everyone feels like family deserves, you know, a pass. Some people do end relationships with family, and I think that they have every right to do that. And I could also understand and respect if someone is like, yeah, I don't know how many more Thanksgivings I have with grandma, and I don't really want to spend the time, you know, arguing about this. I know what her views are, or I know what Aunt so-and-so thinks about this topic, and I'm just going to accept that about them and not necessarily try to change their mind. I don't think as an outsider you can really tell someone the right move there. I think that's really a personal and specific thing based on your relationship with that person. And it could be different for different family members, right? Like the way you maybe make an exception for grandma, your sibling may not. And that's okay as well, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. To your point about what do you want out of this, I think a lot of times when engaging with politics, there's just this desire to feel heard and understood, and have somebody acknowledge what's important to you. And so I say this to my clients all the time, but, you know, I'm going to, as your therapist, I'm going to challenge you to do the hard work, because you're the one who's here and you're the one who's kind of showing up to engage differently with people or with experiences in your life. And so that sometimes there is going to be more pressure on you. It might not feel fair that other people aren't trying to change or trying to do things differently, but you can't control other people. You can only control yourself. And so when engaging in these political discussions, can you shift from, you know, you're wanting to feel heard and understood, you're wanting somebody else to validate what's important for you. Can you model that behavior? Can you shift from trying to convince somebody to understanding? And that doesn't mean that you have to agree with what they're saying. That can mean that you say, well, tell me why you see it that way. You can get curious with them. You can say, you know what, I see that you care about this. I see that you want what's best for our country. You want what's best for your kids, for yourself. I want the same. This is how I see it. Shifting that perspective a little bit and trying to find moments of micro connection to help lower the defensiveness, while also regulating your own nervous system while having those conversations.
Yeah, so you really just touched on like so many things that I was thinking as well. You know, I'm pulling from the Gottmans here a little bit, but they talk about a soft startup like the way that you start a conversation matters. And they actually say they can predict how the conversation will go according to how it starts. And some of that, I think, goes back to what you mentioned about knowing what you're trying to get out of the conversation. So sometimes just like setting the stage with a soft startup, like, listen, I know this can be a touchy topic. I want to engage in conversation about it, but I do want us to do it respectfully, or, you know, I'm okay with us not agreeing, but can we at least like attempt to hear each other? You know, the way that you enter the discussion, I think, matters. And then using I statements when possible, like owning your own feelings, beliefs. You will find that there's a lot more opposition and arguing and resistance when you try to tell other people about themselves, as opposed to when you just talk about yourself. So, you know, using your I statements, I feel, I think, I believe, I'm prioritizing, like all of that is you owning that this is your stance on it. I love the idea of trying to find some sort of common ground, because usually there is, even if you have different ideas about how to go about accomplishing the goal, you can maybe find a common ground in like, okay, we're both looking to feel safe here, or we're both wanting to feel respected here, or we're both wanting access to opportunity here. We may have different ideas about how to go about that, but I can relate to that, right? I can find some sort of common ground. And then recognizing that validation does not necessarily equal agreement. Like, in other words, you can validate that you want the same things, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you agree with their stance on it, and that's okay. But I love the idea of modeling that for family members who maybe aren't looking to engage in these conversations differently per se, but we always talk about as an MFT, as, you know, systems focused. When you do anything to change the system, it changes the system. So if you show up in a way where you're modeling that, inevitably you will probably find that people either start to mirror it, or they just recognize that like you're doing it differently, and so they may find themselves kind of like adjusting accordingly.
Yeah, I love that. I think that part of that too, in being able to kind of model that regulation, that nervous system regulation, and that ability to come into the conversation in a regulated way, is also noticing what's happening in your body. I think that with family especially, it can be so easy to kind of get activated so quickly. And so, you know, for this listener, for other listeners that struggle with this around the holidays, you're going to be around family a lot. There's going to be some frustrations that are going to come up. Noticing what's happening. How am I feeling? Is my heart starting to race? Am I clenching my fists? Am I feeling like I just want to like say something? Like, am I getting activated essentially? And if you are noticing that, pausing, maybe take a step outside, take a deep breath, like, try to regulate your body in order to be able to engage in these conversations in the way that we're talking about. Or maybe you recognize, I'm not going to be able to engage in this conversation in a way that I want to right now. And so instead of trying to, I need to remove myself. I need to take a break. I need to take a step back. And that's okay too. You can always come back to it when you are more regulated if it's something that's important to you.
So glad you said that, because yes, being able to recognize the signs that you are becoming activated, like that is your responsibility, right? Like, and it is something that you are probably going to get better at as you practice. And so I would say practicing emotional regulation, like coping skills, even prior to, can be incredibly helpful. That can be a deep breathing exercise. That can be like a muscle tension exercise. That could be stepping away and listening to music. But yes, it is better to step away than to almost like watch yourself leave yourself, and you're like, okay, here we go, I'm flying off the handle. Like, recognize that there is some choice there. And so if you notice, okay, I'm actually done listening, I'm ready to just attack or just be critical, then that's a good time to just step away and say, okay, I don't know that this conversation is going to continue in a positive way, so I'd rather just, you know, end it here. And I think choosing the time and place can be incredibly important too, because, like, you know, if after everyone's maybe had a few drinks or something, like everybody's feeling a little more loose, maybe that's not the best time to have a super serious political conversation when you know that you're not really going to be able to regulate yourself well. So I think that speaks to like your personal sense of accountability for, I have to be responsible for the way that I show up here. And if I'm not able to do it, even if you recognize a family member isn't doing it so well, take responsibility for yourself and take a break and step away.
Right. And I think to that point of knowing when to step away, I think that you also have to understand that you have to accept some limitations. You might go into a conversation super regulated. You might be able to take those deep breaths. You might be able to model that curiosity or engage in some of that like micro connection. And you still might run into a situation where whoever you are engaging with they're not going to meet you there. They're not going to model that same thing back. They're not going to look to try to understand. And you might just recognize that you're always going to be leaving those conversations feeling unheard, unvalued, less connected. And so if you know that, I think also accepting that maybe that's just a relationship where you just don't get into those conversations. If it's a relationship that you want to preserve, even if they bring it up, you remove yourself from that conversation or from that moment. And that's hard. And I understand that you want to be able to have kind of a different experience with certain people in your life. And there's only so much that you can do. But if you do want to preserve that relationship, sometimes it does just come with accepting that maybe you won't be able to have conversations around politics.
Yeah, which is a bummer because I do think there is value in talking to people who feel differently than you or maybe have a different stance on something. And I think what you're bringing up, like there may be limitations that you have to accept. You may also have to accept that you're not necessarily working with the same set of facts. I found that is a very big fuel of tension and dissension is when people get their information from different news sources. Facts, while they can be factual, context matters. And so depending on the set of facts that a person is coming with and their own life experiences, you may find that you're not really speaking the same language. Like you're not actually talking about the same thing. And so I think when you can recognize that that's what's happening, that's a good moment to kind of back up. If you're able to clarify and be curious, like you mentioned, rather than just, judging or attacking, if you can ask a question about that's interesting. Like, where did that come from? Or I'm curious to know, like, what that was based on. You might find that you're able to, like, engage in a slightly less tense conversation. But it's hard to tell someone that they're just flat out wrong. Most people don't respond well to that. And if the goal is truly to change someone's mind, you will always find that entering the conversation with like empathy, a desire to hear what they're saying, validation of what is important to them is always going to be more effective than, well, that sounds stupid or you're an idiot or, that is absolutely going to bring up people's defenses. So again, being mindful of like, what is the goal here?
I think that's a perfect wrap up for this. And I appreciate this question, especially on this week. I hope that people are able to take some of this and apply it if you are worried about what might be coming up this week for you. I hope that this is helpful. Carli, did you have any final thoughts around this?
No, just good luck. Good luck to everyone sitting around the dinner table and maybe feeling a little anxious. But you've got this. Yeah. You can do it. So.
Yeah, I think if you're listening to this, then that's a great sign. It sounds like you want a different experience in relationship. And so taking that with you too.
Fair enough.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. See you next time.
That's it for today's episode. We hope it gave you something to reflect on, or maybe even that aha moment.
If so, you know the drill. Rate, review, subscribe, and don't forget to text it to the group chat. Remember, sharing is caring.
If you have a question you want us to tackle, big or small, we want to hear it.
Email us at info@askatherapistpod.com or slide into our DMs on Instagram at askatherapist_pod.
You bring the questions.
We'll bring the insight and probably a metaphor or two.
This is Ask a Therapist.
See you next time.